Grace. She works in the School of Ed. This is her third year here at Point Loma. But she's very knowledgeable about this topic and lots of other topics as well. But autism is something that she's passionate about, and I'm so glad to have her here to help us figure out what we should be doing, because disabilities are on the rise, and we're going to hear about that through this presentation. But I want to tell you a little bit about Grace. She has been affiliated with CAPTAIN, which is the California Autism Professional Training and Information Network, for the past 6 years, and recently organized and presented at the 4th annual conference focused on evidence-based practices for inclusion. She has spent many years as an autism and educational specialist in San Diego Unified, and consults with K-12 school teams on students with challenging academic and behavioral needs. And she's designed and taught autism authorization classes for education specialists in the San Diego Unified District. And prior to becoming a specialist, Grace taught students with autism spectrum disorders and intellectual disabilities, and has conducted partial and full-day trainings on topics in special education. This is a topic that a lot of our faculty have been asking for training on, and so this is part of a series that Grace is participating in, and other faculty members from the School of Ed. So let's welcome Grace.
Well, thank you. This is one of my most favorite groups of people. I just love students, adults, anyone with autism. I kind of found my way right before college. I went for psychology, and then I said, no, wait, there's something about these kids with autism that I want to kind of connect with a little bit more. And since then, I can't tell you how much I just love this population. However, I know that they can be challenging because they are so diverse and because there are so many different characteristics. And what may work with one may not work with another, and I know that's challenging, especially in higher ed. So before I begin really quick, could I hear a little bit about how many of you have a student currently right now with autism? How many have had them in the past? Okay, all of you, all right. And so tell me, is there anything that's kind of you're remembering about that, or some of the struggles or maybe discussions you had about having those students? Yeah.
Well, the hardest one is the one that just gets so incredibly frustrated when you don't give them the answer and it says mean things to you. And you just...
So frustrations, and then obviously saying mean things to a professor, which is not acceptable, right? Maybe in K-12, not here. Okay, yeah.
You know, we do labs where students have to work with each other, or sometimes stuff in the classroom that students have to work together. And, you know, it's not true of everybody with autism, but sometimes the ability to do group work, but it's a central thing to what's going on.
Yeah, group work is difficult for a lot of these guys. Yes, definitely like that.
The ability to be able to read and comprehend and actually do the work that is required as a result of having read and comprehended the material, and just flat out not able to do it. And expecting to be able to, you know, that's okay, then you don't have to do the assignment, and, you know, once again, you're basically given to and done for the person.
There's a bit of enabling that happened prior, and so it's kind of carrying over.
And they simply evidently don't have the ability either. So in this context, it makes it extremely difficult if they don't actually have that ability. But then yes,
I guess for me, it's realizing how it's not a monolithic group. So I've had 3 that I know of who were, I mean, with other people, you wonder if they have a slight.
Yes.
3 who were clearly identified and all had very different behavioral patterns. Yeah. And so one just did really well at comprehending literature and responding to it and interacting with me and with the class. One was very antisocial and even got violent in my office with me. And one had his own uniqueness, but we worked it out, and he was turned into one of my favorite students. So
I like to hear that happy ending.
just recognizing that you can't just categorize them all the same way.
Anyone else?
my challenge is right along with that, not knowing where they're at on the spectrum, so that the accommodations that do come in, I realize those come from different places, but just not understanding the full spectrum of what that does to this individual.
Great, great.
Group work has been challenging, reading social cues and references, and then I had a real hard time with the practical application of, working with young children, and so really trying to coach that aspect.
Great, these are all some of the basic topics that we're going to cover, and I want to address your concerns as well as kind of go into what are some tips and some successful things we can do to help make these students more successful in college, because we know they're one of the big group that struggles, unfortunately. You already hit one of them. When you know one person with autism, it really is one person with autism. Every student I've worked with, every adult I've spoken with, they always give me different glimmers. As much as I think I kind of have like, oh, I understand why you did that, it's something else. Of course, there are general characteristics, and that's how we diagnose, autism, and they have to have certain things to, have the diagnosis, but they really are different in the way that they speak, think, interact, feel the environment, process things. So there is a uniqueness, and well, I love it because that's my wheelhouse. Like, I love trying to figure out these kids and then being like, okay, this is what they need and this is how they think. It's not easy when they're one of many other students in your class and you're trying to get things going. So I have a quick video of Temple Grandin. How many of you have heard of her? Okay, so she's amazing. She's kind of how I first got into autism. One of my first teachers in college said, you got to read one of her books. So she is an adult with a PhD with autism. She's kind of one of the first ones out there. And if you guys remember like the movie Rain Man, like that was the first time autism kind of came out there. And she was one of the first persons with autism to have a voice. And she published books and has presented everywhere. She actually has a documentary on HBO. I would encourage you to watch it if you haven't. Claire Danes plays it really nicely. And so she's just going to give you a little insight of how her brain works. So let's just kind of break that down. What are some of the things that she mentioned that were kind of different or something new for you? Taking a picture. And most, people with autism think they're very concrete. So the idea of comprehension and, getting ideas from the text and something abstract, there's a lot of inferring, and a lot of good literature, rich literature, idioms, metaphors. That's not clear. They need pictures. They are most of them, not that they can't learn, but they're very, very concrete. So if there's a picture of it, if you say a desk and there's a picture of a desk and they can picture in their mind, they can understand it much better than a lot of the fun things that we say, right? All the metaphors and idioms and, colloquial things that we say. So pictures. So very concrete. What else?
Detail.
Details.
Think in detail.
Thinking in details. So when another part of the problem of comprehension is to have comprehension of something, you have to put all the little details together. That's not natural to them. For example, and I've done presentations where I've been at a special school and the kids will run in while we're doing the presentation. Well, if anyone else walked in right now, if you walked in, oh, someone's talking, I see eating, there must be a presentation, you very quickly can look at the social ramifications, what's happening in the environment, and adjust your behavior accordingly because you can take in the whole picture. I've had students, we crack up because we work there, but they would come in and be like, oh, right in the middle of everything. Just totally blind. They would grab my cell phone. I'm like, oh, that's my phone. They're just looking at all of the details. And that's why the social skills is really hard for them because they're not looking at the environment. That's not easy for them to grasp. They can be taught, but that's not something that comes natural. They are truly detail specific. So if you want something with details, you'll get it from these guys, but the comprehension, that's another reason that a lot of the social skills and comprehension can be more overwhelming. Yeah.
One of the things that hit me too is the connection with the details in the pictures, and I don't know maybe if I'm extrapolating this too much, but does that also mean, like, she thinks of specific steeples or whatever, does that make it harder to extrapolate from this one detailed situation to kind of a similar?
Yes. So the other big overarching problem is generalization. So for example, I teach, I have a 7 and 9-year-old. I teach them to say thank you, right? Someone gives them something, thank you, you're welcome. And, then when we go to the grocery store and someone gives them a sticker, thank you. I don't have to say in every single situation with every single person, they are able to do it now, right? They've learned it once or twice, and, ideally, they say thank you when they're supposed to. The real, that mind is, every time I'm saying thank you to someone new, it's a new situation. It's a new person, it's a new place, it's a new reason I'm saying thank you. So that idea of generalization is very, very difficult. That's why they'll learn social skills, they'll learn how to do things, but the application is almost like a brand new thing. So a lot of, when we used to write goals, IEP goals and social skill goals for them, we would say you have to do it across 3 environments and at least with 3 different people. So we know that they're able to apply it a bit more, because they get stuck. Yeah. Great, thank you for bringing that up. So, Temple Grandin, we'll talk more about her in a little bit. So what do we know about it? Just kind of a little background of it. It was first identified in the 40s. Dr. Leo Kanner was looking at a group of boys. They didn't have a lot of language, and they just really seemed to be into themselves and not really social, kind of just wanted to do their own thing. And so he coined the term autism from the Greek auto self. So it's a selfism. That's, they were into themselves. They weren't really outward and they didn't really want to be social. Around the same time, Asperger was over in Europe. And he notices a group of boys, similarly. And they had language, but again, they weren't really social. They didn't really seem to want to, work together or talk or do things with each other. So that's how that Asperger kind of term came around. His work didn't get translated to English. Like, we didn't even find it till like the 80s, and so that's why it got added to our diagnostic statistical manual in '94, which is why this whole group of Asperger, these higher functioning kiddos, people, if you think back to high school or college, they might not have been diagnosed at the time. And so, around the same time, they were noticing this. Now, did it only start in the 40s? No. They've actually looked at records of some of the unfortunate people that were institutionalized, and a lot of their characteristics are actually really similar to something with autism at the time. Right now, most children are diagnosed after age 4, depending on how the access to medical, transportation, lots of different things. Sometimes the diagnosis can be delayed, unfortunately. But right now they're saying at 2, if you get a diagnosis at 2, it's pretty reliable. It's valid and reliable. So at 2, it's, you can make that diagnosis. The problem why sometimes it takes a while to diagnose is because it's not a chromosomal, it's not a blood test. There's not a way to say, you don't run babies through brain scans machines when they're born and say, oh, he has autism. They notice there's difference with adults with autism. They've done all those kind of scans, but there's no markers just yet. What they're looking at is there's a range, which is why there's a range of people with autism. And at the moment, right now, there is definitely, most scientists agree, there's a genetic origin. Some of this is based on the studies of twins and siblings. If you have identical twins and one has autism, much greater chance of having the other one with autism. Same with siblings. It does also occur more often in people who have genetic and chromosomal conditions, for example, like Down syndrome or Fragile X. So we know that there is a genetic component. However, there's a lot of other environmental things that everyone's looking at still. Like, okay, you might have the genes, but then something environmental is bringing it out. And it is on the rise. I mean, yes, we're better at diagnosing. Yes, we're better at, we're looking at the higher functioning kids that maybe kind of slipped through the cracks before, but there is definitely an increase right now. It's actually up to 1 in 59. And so that's a lot. You know, I think just even 15 years ago, it was like 1 in 500. So we are better able to diagnose, and they're definitely improved. Boys are definitely 4 times more likely to be identified. Right now, what the research is saying that maybe the girls have been slipping under the cracks a little bit, that they're able to kind of present a little higher, maybe have a little bit more social skills, and so they're not getting flagged as much, but we still think that there's more of a population of boys with this diagnosis. It definitely occurs across all racial, ethnic, and socioeconomic groups. And in places we can really measure that have a good diagnosis tool, and you know, we look at all that in the United States, Europe, and Asia right now. It's about 1 to 2% of the population. And the other kind of neat thing, I think, is that previously, when we were asking, you know, questions and trying to give them IQ scores, we were using verbal IQ tests, right? And other ways. And so what did Temple Grandin say? Verbal's not her thing, right? So there are nonverbal IQ tests, and there are other ways to measure IQ. And now we're realizing that there's a good population, about half, that have average to high average IQs. So yes, there is a spectrum, and I'm going to focus on these average to high average, the ones that are here right now. I can go into that another time, but the kids that are here are average to high average IQs. We know that. And what do we mean by the autism spectrum? It's, you know, like I said, it is that spectrum because they all have different symptoms, characteristics, and abilities. But to actually get the diagnosis in the new DSM-5, you have deficits in social communication, and you have what they call restricted and fixated interest. So you really have super exciting topics that these kids are just entrenched about, and or they can have really repetitive behaviors. So there's a bit of this, and then there's a bit, obviously, of the social and communication deficits, and so that's how you get it. Previously to the DSM-5, we did have 5 different categories that kind of fell around autism. We had Asperger's as its own thing, autistic disorder as its own thing, childhood disintegrative disorder, Rett's disorder, and then we had this lovely one, pervasive developmental disorder not otherwise specified. And that was kind of placed like, you're somewhere there, but you're not really fitting everything here and not everything here, so I'm just going to give you this. So we did have a lot of students with PDD and OS. That was kind of, we thought they were still under the spectrum. Now, with the new DSM-5, we kind of took all of these and just made it one giant umbrella. And there's some reasons for that too, but I won't go into that too much. There's just not much of a difference, truly, when you look at it. So, what does it look like with these kiddos at college? Well, like I said, impairments in communication, especially the social communication. Restricted repetitive cognitions or behaviors. So these are the kids that you give an assignment and they start writing on their own topic instead of what you would ask them to write about. Impairments in social abilities. So we talked about that. The social skills, group work. The cognition to understand what's expected and how to work in a group is missing. It just has not typically been developed like other kids growing up. They just learn differently. They can learn it, but it's not natural for them. And then the other big thing about this is the sensory input. So a lot of our students can either be hyper, so everything affects them. The light, the sounds, they feel everything more, smells, taste, touch, or hypo, where they can sit in the loudest room in the world and not even be paying attention to it. The problem with our students right now, especially with this, is it can go back and forth all the time. We never know what might be triggering them. If you ever think about like a really bad migraine, and you know how light hurts, right? Or anyone who's never been pregnant, you smelled everything, that's sometimes what can happen. And of course that can interfere with what's happening.
Did you mean that students can switch between the two, or students are one or the other?
They can switch between hyper and hypo, and it can be very different sensory things. Okay, so let's get into the social part.
Yep.
We know that they have impairments. And there's a big reason for this. Let me go back to what we were talking about, how they're very concrete, right? So she was saying how she sees in pictures. She knows what one thing is, and so when we give directions, how abstract sometimes are our directions? How fluffy are they? How, oh, maybe between 3 and 5 pages. Some professors may, give that as a guideline. Some professors mean 3 to 5 pages. If it's 5 pages in one paragraph, you're not getting any points on the assignment. And for students, you're able to kind of read, oh, this is what that professor means, and you infer. Our kiddos cannot do that. A lot of that is because, they don't understand what words mean. They don't have concepts. And a big part of that is they're not able to read facial expressions or body language. So let's go back to that. How many of you have had babies or been around babies recently? And isn't it so exciting when they're a couple months old and you smile at them and they smile back? And it's so neat to see how interested in faces babies are. Babies love faces. And the fact that they look at faces that are smiling and then smile back, like they're excited to see faces. And they read moms, dads, caregivers' faces. To the point where they actually, can look at mom, look at a bottle, look back at mom, and mom goes, oh, okay, they want the bottle. They're starting at a very, very, very early age reading faces and looking at faces. One person with autism said, it's not that I don't like faces, I just don't find them that interesting. Which means, from early on, they're looking at the fan spinning around. That's more interesting than reading a face. So think from early on to now, how old are they? 19, 20, when they're coming in here, they've missed out on reading all of this. And this gives you a lot of information, right? So for example, if I walk up to you really, really close, I'm making it comfortable, but right, her eyes might get big, right? I mean, what do? She might actually step back if she had the chance, if she was standing up, and I, as a typical, right, I can read social, I go, oh, I'm too close to her, and I'm gonna move back. If I don't recognize that, I'm gonna stand right in front of her and blah, 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 blah. These are the kids this is why, they'll walk right up in the middle of a conversation. They don't realize that it's rude. They're not reading your conversation. They're not looking at your social cues. So this is kind of the crux of the difficulty with facial expressions and body language. Again, sarcasm and idioms, really hard. And I know I am super sarcastic, and when I was teaching in my classroom, I really had to watch it because I had kids, one had watched SpongeBob and he had done something wrong, and he was all about how, he was like, my teacher's gonna kill me, and you really, really, really thought that? Like, really? And I was like, no, that's not what it means. SpongeBob is gonna be okay. We had a kid that, when I was working in the schools, someone had said, hey, get out of here, and he literally tried to leave the campus. Take everything literal, and think about all the language we use all the time. So that's gonna be difficult. We can teach them again what it means, but that's really hard for them. So, they're having a hard time taking in things, they're going to have even a harder time expressing. So the conversation skills. To know when you go up to someone, you don't just start talking to them right away, you have to say, hey, how are you? Right? Or on a phone call. There's one man with autism, he talks about how he had to write a script for him every time he tried to make a phone call. Because he was so excited. He'd pick up the phone, he'd say, hey, do you want to do this? And they'd say yes, and he just hung up. He was like, okay, done. And he realized you have to do a greeting, you have to do a closing, all these extra little things we put in there. It's not necessary, but it's social, right? Facial expressions, if they don't know how to read them, then they're not going to know how to do them as well. So sometimes they're going to look angry when they're not. They're going to look surprised when they're not. They're not going to pay attention to what they're doing. I was working with this one really, really gifted kiddo in middle school, and he had a hard time because he wanted to be social. And he was walking through the hallways, really kind of just like a scowl on his face and just going, hi, hi, hi. And so we were working with him in the speech therapist, and we said, your friends look really mad, or your friends think you're really mad, because you're looking at them like that. And later that afternoon, we were checking in on him, or later that week, we were checking on him, and the vice principal had come over to hear our conversation. He said, oh, I saw Stephen do that, but I didn't realize what was going on. I was like, what do you mean? He's like, I saw him go, hi, Mr. Smith. All right, we're getting closer, But it looks odd. Sometimes they're just it's not natural, right? They're still working at it. Pronouns can still be hard because our pronouns concrete. He, she, you, there, her. you know, hopefully at this age, you know, in college, they'll have that a little bit more finite, but that still might be something you hear or see in their writing or speaking. Echolalia, that is when they hear something and they repeat it. They may repeat it a lot, they may repeat it a ton. It might be, they might copy exactly what you say and say it over and over in class, or they might hear it called delayed echolalia, and that's something that happened, you know, or watched on TV, and then they're saying it in class. A lot of times they're using this as a script. So, you know, if anyone has any favorite movies, and you know how sometimes it's easy to throw those little favorite movie lines out. Well, for these guys, it's instead of having them come up with their own language, they kind of use what they heard, and you know, in a setting that they think it fits. Now, they think it fits. Sometimes it doesn't. Many times it doesn't. And a lot of times if it's inappropriate, or it doesn't seem like the right setting to do it, I say, where did you hear that, or where did you see that? YouTube, you know, on the games, you know, gaming things, all of those. Sometimes they'll watch a movie or they'll even hear something in the hallway. And there's been really interesting conversations that we've had to have about, yes, I know you heard this guy say that to that girl while they were joking, and they're really good friends for them to say that, but you cannot say that in the middle of chemistry to a random person you don't know. You know, if they're hearing stuff and they're trying it out, or they're hearing stuff and they're using it to have conversations or communicate, and it can be difficult for our kids. Intonation. So if you heard Temple Grandin, you heard how she has kind of an interesting way of speaking. And that's, do you guys have that with some of the students, or you had that? They just have a different way of speaking. They may be very flat, or, you know, I've had those kids that are like, hello, how are you? Great, you know, real flat, loud. Sometimes this is one of the things we have to talk to them about you might have the answer in class, but the way you're saying it doesn't sound appropriate. You know, your intonation is too strong, or, you know, you're sounding like you're angry or something when you're answering the question. And then there might be just motor skills of speech that may not come up as part of some of it. So, the social part. They are, again, that social cognition, the idea that they can actually read a situation and know what to do in it, is not really there. So, understanding pretend, or fact from fiction. We've had students that get really mad. I had one boy that they had to write a thing about Civil War. You know, he had to put himself into perspective. And he was just insistent. He said, I was born in 2003. I was not around in the Civil War. I cannot write from the perspective of that. You know, da 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 da. Like, he just couldn't put himself in that place. It was just not real for him. We talked about the lack of engagement in others. So eye contact, first of all, that's a whole debatable thing. What most people say with autism is that I can look at you or I can listen to you, but I really can't do both at the same time. On the flip side, we've had those students that have been drilled to have eye contact, and I have met some of these adults at this point, and when they're talking, they are literally like this the entire time, and it's so uncomfortable. Because eye contact really is a delicate dance, isn't it? I mean, how do you know to look away, right? It's so.
It's also cultural.
And it's a cultural thing as well. Yeah, so with eye contact, you know, they might not be looking, but it doesn't mean they're not interested. One of the biggest misconception is just because they're not social doesn't mean that they don't want to be. At this age, they have tried and tried and tried and failed and failed and failed miserably. And so a lot of times it looks like they want to be for themselves, but the majority of the time is that they have failed so bad they've given up. Which is why there's a lot of like anxiety and depression along with our higher functioning kiddos. The lack of flexibility and taking turns, another thing, you know, again, selfism, egocentric. The boy I was talking about when we were looking at the smiles, right, but we also were trying to explain to him how, you know, we know he loved his conversation about aeronautics. We said, you know, your friends might want to talk about what they like to talk about, and you need to ask them. And he, again, looked straight at us and he said, but I don't care. I know, but it's a way of being social, right? I mean, how many of us say like, hey, how are you? you know, or talk to like the grocery store clerk. Or, I mean, we're just social people. We're just, oh, have a great day, you know. Well, they don't see the purpose in that. I mean, you can convince, you know, you can try to explain it, but it's just not natural to them. They're not like, oh yeah, let me just say, hey, how are you? Let me find out about your weekend, because that's not necessarily my interest. So that's, you know, some of the other reasons why the social skills are difficult. Honesty. So they like to be very honest. And the problem is that they have a lot of thoughts. And as we do, we have a lot of thoughts. But we're able to kind of filter. So we might be thinking a lot of things, but we don't always say everything we're thinking, because we want to keep our jobs, our marriages, right? These guys don't know to filter. If they feel it, if they think it, they say it. And, you know, honesty is great, except when, you know, it's blamed, right? I still smell your coffee breath. I see a pimple on your face. I mean, they just tell it like it is, you know, which I get it, but, you know, it's not common, right? We don't do it socially. Which also goes into the idea that they don't, you know, they're just saying it. They think, oh, it's real, it's happening. I'm not recognizing that it's going to affect you. That you have a different thought, that you might actually be upset by what I'm saying. So when you were getting, you know, mean names, my just gut is that they had seen someone do that previously. They had learned that when you're mad, you say mean names to someone, and they're not recognizing that, no, you know, this is a professor, we don't talk that way. Like, that social piece wasn't there. It was just, this is what I do when I'm mad, because I saw someone else do it. And then the other piece is the poor imitation skills. So from early on, that's all we do. That's how we learn to play. If you see little kids, I mean, they copy each other. And all the way up to, you know, if you're at a new place and you don't know, you know, what the social skills are or whatever, you know, you usually kind of find, well, what's everyone else doing? You know, or how's everyone else, you know, what are we talking about, right? These guys, we had to teach them to do that. That's not in their repertoire. We actually have to say, listen, copy someone else. When you don't know what to do in a social situation, find someone and just copy them, you know, imitate them. So, you know, if you have your book open to a certain page, we want them, you know, ideally, and, you know, they should open the book to this certain page. Just, you know, copy. Like, that's what everyone does in the classroom. But that's why these guys are the ones that stick out in the classroom, because they don't know not to raise their hand 100 times, because no one else is doing it. They're just not picking that up. Again, they can be taught, but it's not natural. So that's a little bit more about that part. And then the behavior piece. So kind of restricted range of interest. So Disney is definitely one of those top interests. Now I know there's adults who like Disney, so you know, I'm not gonna say there's anything wrong, but a lot of our kids have these like fixated interests, and Disney just happens to be one of the, you know, most well-known. But I've had elevators, trains, toilets. Did you have
Doors.
Doors.
Trash trucks.
Trash trucks.
Our 14-year-old neighbor.
Okay.
Aircraft.
Aircraft.
Pretty Little Liars, the show.
Oh.
Yeah, that's all this student could think of.
Highways and streets.
Highways and streets. Yeah. And I bet they could tell you how to get everywhere.
Exactly.
Yep. Yeah. So it's interesting. They have these amazing, you know, interest, and they have so much knowledge about it. It's just not typical of what maybe other people are going to be talking about, right? Their age. That's why we call it like restricted. You know, it's something amazing, and they have this wealth of knowledge, but it's not typical necessarily. I think it's a great, you know, tool. You know, if we know what they're excited about, this is what we can help them research, write about, you know, learn about. I mean, we can use it as a tool, and that's what I've always done, you know, my students. And it turns out, well, for example, I you know, this is in 4th grade. He was a boy, and he kept running into the girls' bathroom and flushing the toilet. And it took a long time to figure out what it was about the girls' bathroom, but apparently the acoustics are better when you flush a toilet in there than the boys' bathroom. Okay. So we were like, what are we going to do with this? Like, he was really obsessed with swirling water. I mean, that was just his thing. So we recorded sounds of it. You know, we found YouTube videos. I mean, and there are YouTube videos, by the way, of flushing toilets. It's going on. And so he would work for that, right? Random. But we were trying to fit it in that he was not running to the girls' bathroom, okay? Later on, I see him in middle school. And I was checking in on him, and I was like, how are you doing? You know, and he kept trying to say something to me. I'm like, what are you saying? He was telling me the brand of the toilet that's at the middle school. And it was like a month later that my plumbing went out, and like I had to go to Home Depot, and I'm looking around, I'm like, I bet he would be the one that could totally tell me the best kind of toilet and the brand and the, you know. So what I'm saying is all of these interests can really be used as their job. You know, people who work in museums, they get to talk about their favorite topic all day long. And they don't care if anyone's listening or not. You know, like that's, you know, so engineering, you know, all this really fun, interesting things can be ideally a stepping stone to getting them into a nice career that they like. But it does stick out a little bit. Insistence on sameness and the idea that they prefer predictability and routines. Why do you think that is?
Because they can't generalize.
Yes. They can't generalize. They don't understand what everyone's talking about. They can't fit in. Everything is kind of scary, sensory-wise, social-wise. So they're going to stick to what they know. And you know, in very chaotic situations, if you ever moved or anything like that, don't you just kind of like want that? Okay, where's my spoon so I can eat my yogurt? You know, like where's that one thing? You know, boxes are everywhere. So that's kind of where they're at. On a flip side, I want to say we also are somewhat like that. So if you're driving here, you're heading to work and you get a flat tire, would anyone have a little bit of fussing behaviors at all? Right? So we will react, but then what are we able to do? We're able to go, okay, hold on, all right, let me call work, let me let someone know that I'm going to be running late, I won't be able to get to the meeting, I'll call AAA. You know, we can problem solve and calm ourselves down and figure it out. That's not in their wheelhouse either. So when they're thrown off, they are thrown off. And it's really, really hard for them to kind of go, okay, it's okay, I'll be okay. I'll, and like the way we can kind of process it. So that makes things hard for them as well. Another kind of characteristic of them is that stereotypic repetitive motor movement. So a lot of times, now at this age, they should have learned not to be doing this anymore. A lot of them aren't flapping as much, but they might be rocking still. We really encourage fidgets, in the classroom, because it looks much more natural to be playing with your hair or, with a pen or something like that. So we really try to get them to use more fidgets to make it look more, like typical, but you might still see them kind of doing this.
Yeah, picking his nose. Oops, sorry.
Oh, picking it down.
All the way through.
Are you going to talk later about how you, when they get really frustrated and then they get disturbed, something doesn't go right for them, how to bring them back to?
Yeah. Well, and I mean, I'll just jump in right now. Part of this is kind of understanding where they're coming from and what will work for one. Again, I'll give you a generalization, but to really know the student, having kind of a script to calm down with or what to do when you're upset. Visuals, anything in front of them, like a plan, can help. We used to use social stories. A lot of them used social stories back when they were in K-12. And it's literally just like, when I get upset, this is what sometimes I might get upset. Sometimes things might not go the way they should. It's okay, I can breathe, I can ask for help. Like, it just gives them some guidelines. And the idea that it's visual is because when we're stressed, we all kind of cling to visuals. Anyone been flying recently at the airport? Okay, so you know how you have your bag packed and you get through, at all the lovely, you take off your shoes and, you have your boarding pass and you're set. And yet, what do most of us still do? What do we go look at? We go look at the blue screen. We still want to make sure that it's on time, even though we know we got everything's boarding pass, we're done. In times of stress, we still kind of cling to what we can see. When I'm really busy, I'm like, okay, what's on my calendar again? What do I have visually? So for our kiddos, same thing. We want to give them a little bit more information that they can process visually and kind of help calm down. So that's a nutshell, but I can give you more. So a lot of them are going to have those problem behaviors because they're frustrated. They don't know what to do. They don't know how to communicate, right? They haven't learned this is what I do when I'm mad. A lot of times in K-12, we say, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this. Don't throw, don't yell, don't scream. But a lot of them haven't learned what to do. And a lot of them, they think they can't be mad. And it's like, no, 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 everyone gets mad, but there's things you can do, and there's things you can't do, you know? And so that's the application part that might be hard for them as well. And then the other thing, just kind of keep in mind, again, I kind of mentioned the sensory thing, but the hypersensitivity to sounds, light, smells, taste, touch. I've had kids zoned in on perfume. I've had kids like smell my hair like Pantene. I'm like, oh my gosh, you knew. I mean, they are very, very selective. They have interesting diets sometimes, the crunchiness they can't do, or saltiness. Vegetables actually have a really strong smell. So they've always had very difficult diets. Most kids have some eating issues because the smell, the taste, the touch. The other piece of this is the auditory tracking. So it's really hard for them to filter sounds. So for example, right now in here, you hear me talking, you hear a little bit of a hum from the computer. There's, a little bit of sounds around, some wrinkling of the papers, What happens with a student with autism, my voice might be just as loud as that humming. And so it's hard for them to tune in sometimes. If you're ever at a loud restaurant and you know how you're trying to talk to the person across from you, but you're picking up everything else, that is what the classroom might be like for them, which is another reason why verbal is just not beneficial for them. One, they have to listen to all the words that I'm saying and kind of almost like translate it into what they know, into the picture that they know. If you ever learned a different language, how you take that, you listen to a word and there's a delay in processing, right? So they're trying to translate it into what they understand. And then other things might be competing sound-wise that you would never even realize. So that's another reason why visuals and more, and I'm not saying like pictures, I'm saying like just writing on the board, PowerPoints, like these things are so helpful for a lot of our kiddos. And the sensations, sometimes you'll see kids kind of not kept very well. It sounds like most of the kids here tend to go home on the weekends, so I think there's still more of a check-in for our kids with autism right now on the campus, or from what I understand, but there are special places to cut hair for kids with autism. Nail trimming, all that kind of stuff, because they feel things differently. And so it's harder for them sometimes to take care of themselves. And of course, all of that is going to affect their arousal, their stamina, their ability to focus. If you ever wore like the wrong shoes one day and you're like, your feet are just aching, or you have, itchy sweater or something, and how you just kind of like, that just bothers you all day. That's what the day-to-day classroom can be like. And so sometimes when it's really overwhelming, they kind of do feel like they need to escape somehow. So you might see them kind of shut down, or might get up randomly and walk out of the room. You're like, where are you going? It's just too much. And so they kind of need a place to calm down. Yeah.
I remember, this was like yesterday, and it's just anecdotal, but I remember when the iPod came out, not the iPhone, the iPod. And I kid you not, I remember the first few students that got the iPod and they're going around campus, with earbuds in. It was to a male student, somebody with mild autistic disorder. They were the ones that were never with anybody. They would come to class early and just kind of sit there, but they would all have their iPod buds in their ear. And it goes to your number 2 on the prior slide. They were just able to shut everything down and just listen to that iPod. It was fascinating.
And it was one of those things we did on purpose. We said this looks more natural. I mean, some of them would walk around with headphones, and that just was not typical, or they literally would walk around like this, or sit at lunch like this. And so we said, once those, came out, we're like, oh, now you can listen to your own preferred thing, it won't stick out, or, it does block out more, so. Yeah. But they do have a hard time putting things in. Temple Grandin actually talks about how when she was giving that speech, how she had a hard time putting the mic in her ear, and she had to come a half hour early just to have it get ready for her. And again, she's PhD, she's super smart. Her shirt that you saw her wearing, she wears that because that's the one shirt that doesn't have seams that bother her. Like, she figured out the buttons and the seams, like all of that works for her. So she bought 20 of the same shirts. Tommy Hilfiger, by the way, has a new line. He has a kid and a step kid with autism, and he has a line of like no tags, seamless, all that stuff for the population. So of course, unfortunately, co-occurring with all of that other stuff is the executive functioning deficit. So, you know, understanding how to start, how to stop a project, planning it out, all of those things can be really hard. In addition, anxiety and depression is really high, you know, a coordination with it, because if you have all these challenges and you still can't fit in, you are anxious and you are depressed. And there is a very high rate of our kiddos that, you know, have autism that also are really, really struggling mental health-wise. Fine motor difficulties. So some of our kids really do have weaker muscle tone. So copious notes in class can be a hindrance, or handwriting. It is so messy, you cannot understand it because they have a weaker muscle tone and handwriting is an issue. Coordination challenges, emotional regulation, sounds like our boy right there, you know, the student you're referring to, sounds like he doesn't know how to regulate, you know, he goes from 0 to 100, or, you know, doesn't know how to catch himself early enough. And then what we would call unexpected, you know, or odd kind of behaviors. Yesterday there was an example of a student that kind of yelled at me in class, I guess this year, said something like, "You don't know how to teach this right." In the middle of class, in front of everyone, right? So it's unexpected, it's one way to term it, right? What I would do in that situation, if you hear that, how many of you had that happen?
All the time.
You know, a lot of times you just have to, what I would do, and again, I don't know every situation or what the kid is, but try to reframe it, like, "Oh, wow, it looks like you're frustrated. Can we talk about this later?" You know, or write down your frustrations and then I can get to them. So a lot of times they're raw, they want to say something, but it's obviously not the right time. So sometimes if you say write it down, or just kind of say, "Oh, it sounds like you're really mad. Let's work on that later," and kind of dismiss it and move on. Executive functioning in a person with autism. Here we go, expressing emotion, not having that filter, right? Every time you feel it, you say it, that might be part of it. The inability to imagine how to get from start to finish, being unable to do things well consistently, forgetting steps to complete a task. Sometimes it's like they can do something and then the next day they can't do it. It's this splinter skill and this ability and the emotional regulation. You know, you have to have everything kind of right, equilibrium to be able to do something. And sometimes these guys go up and down. Very uneven. Unable to filter what's important and what's unimportant to focus on. So remember, they're into details. So if you're trying to do big picture stuff and they're like, "Oh, she wants us to write one sentence," that's what they'll get stuck on and they'll miss the rest of the assignment because they don't know how to filter that in and out. Motivating themselves, getting distracted, not knowing how to start, shutting down because they don't know what to do. These are kind of what it looks like when it manifests.
I want to make a comment.
Sure.
So like one of the bombs say being unable to do things well consistently. One of the things that I've seen is also where they might do something super well. And you say, wow, that takes a lot of intelligence, capacity, ability, and all of a sudden there's something very simple you have to do and they don't do it. And that throws off.
It's very hard. It is, because you're like, wait, you can do all of this and you can't turn in this assignment. I mean, it's like the ups and downs and the unevenness, thank you for pointing that out. It's hard for us to grasp. Like, well, if you can do this, why can't you do something simple? But there's so many other things that get in the way of that. And so this is kind of, you know, if you think about doing one task, there's a lot to doing one task when we really think about a task. We have to be regulated sensory, we have to be regulated emotionally, we have to regulate our attention, and then all these other things come around. So we have to be able to be flexible. So if we try one way and it doesn't work, you know, most of us go, all right, we'll try something else. They get stuck. So that idea of even being flexible or trying something different, that has to be reinforced for them. Central coherence, so again, putting all of the information into one big piece of comprehension or understanding, that can be overwhelming. Executive functioning, where to start, how to do something. Theory of mind, taking someone else's point of view in. So what does this professor really want? I don't know how to do this assignment. I'm not sure what this professor is asking me to do here. Hidden curriculum, that's a term that we call when there's all these social rules among peers, but our kiddos with autism don't know it. You know, what are the cool clothes to wear? What are the cool backpacks to have? Do kids wear backpacks around the campus? What's the cool thing to eat? What do we talk about? What are the movies? What are the music things? Where do we sit? What's the cool place to sit in the cafeteria? What's a good place to sit in the library? How do people even sit together? You know, what's the grouping of, in middle school and high school, we had to sometimes draw out the lunch court and we had to explain them. They sit together, they all play sports together. They sit together, I mean, we really had to break it down. They had no clue of like, how do people even become friends or sit together at lunch. Social pragmatics, so that is the actual applying the social piece and the communication that goes along with it. And then if they're stuck, how do they even ask for help? Appropriately, instead of just getting mad and yelling. A lot to do for our kiddos. On the flip side, I'm going to skip over these 2 slides because I want to move a little bit, but on the flip side, there's a lot of strengths to them as well. And so if we look at the strengths and we harness the strengths and really support the strengths, we can bring them out. So if we know they're detail-oriented, then let's provide them as much detail as we can in the assignments. You know, we might need to scaffold things so that they understand how to get to the big picture, knowing that they like details. Unique humor. And you guys have that, I mean, when I said they became my favorite student, like, sometimes you know, it takes a little bit, but once you figure out, like, sometimes they crack me up. Like, there's some of the things that they come up with and they say, and that's a great way in. Obviously, talking about their favorite thing, that's also another thing to do. You know, hey, what do you like? I mean, they'll talk to you forever about it, so you might have to say we only have 2 minutes to talk about it. But even making that connection, a lot of our kids say, you know, like, well, when you ask about me, then I'm more interested in finding about you. When I get to, you know, show my knowledge of whatever preferred interest that is. Again, they are honest, and that can be helpful. You know, you do want that honesty. They have a big desire to connect, like I said, they're fair and just. They do have that intelligence and that special interest, and so we do want to spend time on that. They do have a good memory. Now, is it always the things that we want them to remember? Not necessarily, but they have a unique memory. The things that they want to memorize or know, I can't even tell you how many kids knew phone numbers, birthdays, addresses. I showed a calendar once. It was an old calendar, it was for a test. And, you know, it had February 1st on a Tuesday. And one of my students goes, that's 2014. And I'm like, I'm sorry, what? You know, it was just a generic, but he knew when that month was in that year when February 1st was on a Tuesday. I mean, sometimes the things that they have, it's just amazing. And when they are interested in a task, they can focus forever. You know, they do need to be reminded to eat and you know, sleep and stuff when they are into something. So if we can find those things that they're really excited about, that's really fun to do to get them focused. And there is a lot of employers that are hiring people with autism because of these strengths. On the last slide, I gave you some references and some resources, and there's an article in there about a whole bunch of different companies that love that these people are so, you know, focused and determined and don't really need all the social things, you know, and they get to work and they're great workers and, you know, they can do what they want to do all day. So it's kind of exciting. And so I think if we just kind of think about focusing on those strengths. Some other tips. So, again, I'm always going to push universal design for learning. And we will have another workshop on that. I think my colleagues is going to do that. And the idea of UDL is that instead of, you know, we come up with a lesson plan or come up with what we're going to do for that hour in class and you know, we try to teach it and then we go, oh shoot, you know, this one needed accommodation for this and oh wait, this one, you know, needs something else over here. We have that ahead of time. We think about that earlier. And so if we're going to show a video, we have closed captioning on it. So not only addresses someone who, you know, may be struggling with hearing, but anyone else who has a hard time just listening to something or watching something, or it helps focus. And it's kind of it's thinking of all the barriers to learning ahead of time. So the other way I think of it is when an old building, like maybe some of the buildings around here, have to be retrofitted for earthquakes, for, ADA compliance to get, wheelchair ramps, all that other stuff, elevators. Now, new building, it already has it in it. And yes, an elevator is good, or, a ramp is good for a stroller, but it is good for a wheelchair, it is good for a bike, and the idea that one little accommodation or a little change may be made for one, particular student or characteristic is good for all students. So there's, we'll talk more about that, but that's the website, there's lots out there about that. So, for your abstract, complex topics, reading comprehension, those types of things, be really clear about the expectations if you can. What does it mean? They really need a lot of information, really concrete information. So, as specific as you can be is going to be really helpful for them to complete the assignment when they need it. Maybe you might have to write down rules of respect for the classroom. How, you can't ask 100 questions over and over again, or, we don't use terms like that. We don't say mean things to our teachers in a nice way, and you can make it with a group, but for that kid, you might actually write those down and put it in, a little binder for them as well. Oral with written instructions. As much as you can have things written, again, visual. I'm starting a group here, hopefully next month, and for kids with autism, actually, to help them learn the soft skills that they need. I'm really excited about it. It's going on at all the colleges, and I just got trained on it. And it's called College Success. There's an employment one, and then there's a college one. And through this series, I'm going to be meeting with some of the students, and it's like 26 different lessons, all about how to be flexible, how to read the room, how to look at things, how to ask for help, how to time manage. And I've met with some of the students that have signed up. I've only had a couple sign up so far, but I met with them and I just said, what's going well here? What do you need help with? What are the classes that you're doing well in? Why? What are the classes you're struggling in? And both three of them said, any class that doesn't have anything written is super hard for me. If someone's just talking the whole time, or we have to all talk together, I can't follow. So just by providing PowerPoints or notes or handouts or something like that is going to give them a boost big time for understanding. And then specific and detailed feedback. They thrive on feedback. They need it. So I know sometimes not all of our students read it, but these guys are really going to need it. And so, you might have that conversation, hey, let's talk about this assignment. Let's, look at it. Here's my feedback on it, and help them process that information. With the executive functioning, we're going to help our students assign priority to assignments. Time management is hard for all kids, right? Especially, coming from K-12 to college. But for some of our students, Nicole Hope Moore, who's, DRC, was telling me how she was having a conversation with some of our kiddos with autism and was worried that one of them was really excited about a new video game coming out the week before finals started last fall. And she was trying to say, okay, I know you're really excited for this. How are you going to make sure you're studying and have time for studying? And that was really, really hard for him to put that as a priority. So just studying tips maybe, sometimes chunking assignments, sometimes, if it's a big assignment, okay, well, here's what you need to have done by this day. Here, helping them kind of make it more manageable and kind of looking what's really important to do. Outlines for studying, and then, because they're so stuck on routines and, things kind of being the way that they like them to be, help them, get prepared for things. So if there is a group assignment, if there is going to be a change, if you can let them know ahead of time. I'm not saying that you have to know all the time, but it's harder for them to pivot, when they get that flat tire. So if we could just give them a little bit of a heads up, their anxiety is going to go down and they'll be able to focus.
What would you suggest for a student who refuses to do the work? I run a writing center here, and we've had a student who you now have in your area who will just sit there and actually just refuse to do the work. And no matter, and this is a one-on-one with a fellow student who is tutoring the student, who he was in a writing class at the time, and just refuses to do it. And, pushes and has that rude behavior and wants you to do the work for him. So what would be an appropriate response for a student who is just refusing to do work?
I think my first question is why? Does he not exactly know how to start? Does he not know what to do? Is handwriting an issue? Does he need help with organization? Like, does he need a graphic organizer? I don't know what the writing assignment is, but I would try to look at where the puzzle is, like why? Is it the student? You know, where's the overwhelming thing? A lot of people, especially our students with autism, they're not good at asking for help. They're not good at asking for more information to clarify. And so it looks like procrastination really just means they need more information. So I think I would start with why, and then if you're not going to do anything here, then what are we doing here? You know, like how can I help you? What do you need to be successful?
Well, I know in this case, the student's mother wrote his papers for him in high school. And so,
This is a question, how much do we need to accommodate
right.
students to get a university degree?
Yeah. Well, and unfortunately, this population has the highest rate of living at home, you know, not being self-sufficient. They have been enabled. A lot of them don't even know how to program their own, calendar on their phone. Someone else is still doing it, you know. So I would start small with maybe that student. So if we have a first paragraph or an outline or a paragraph outline.
Which we did.
Okay. And that's still not. And then the other thing is it a preferred topic? See if he wants to write about what he likes to write about. If the writing, the mechanics part is hard, the other suggestion would be a speech to text kind of thing. You know how we barely text anymore, we're always talking into our phone. And Google Read and Write, that's a free application you can add onto a thing. So maybe that, or asking the DRC see if he can talk about it and then help him organize it. Is he doing it on the computer or hand?
The computer. But he wouldn't even engage in a conversation about it.
I'd love to come hang out with you. I'm really
Well,
serious. This is the kind of thing that I love this. So I would love to kind of figure out what's going on and please use me for that. I mean, this is, I love this kind of, you know. I know it's frustrating for you, but I think that's like, oh, I can't wait to find out what's going on, you know.
And I don't want to derail you, but will these students be required to meet with you? The students who are identified as somewhere on the spectrum, will they be required to work with you? Because we have a real need for that.
Yes. No, they will not be required. It is a choice, but you can definitely push them in the right direction. They do meet with Nicole Hope-Moore and, Disability Resource, and they have certain times, and they're supposed to meet weekly, and she's trying to keep them in check. But this program, and I'm going to do it with one of her assistants, but this is voluntary, and most of them won't sign up unless you say, hey, you know what? Because of this, or you're failing grades last semester, hey, this might be a way for you to learn some new tools, something like that.
How does faculty know about autism? Because the little bit I've been exposed to is I just get an email saying, this person has accommodations with extra time, which doesn't give me any indication as to, is there anything. So I don't know if autism students, more information is given or other.
Do they usually tell you?
It usually
The diagnosis
Yeah,
is
includes the
autism.
diagnosis.
They usually tell you.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
The student has to disclose. The first part of accommodations is that we can't force a student. The student has to disclose and actually request accommodation, which, as Grace mentioned, starts in the DRC. So if you don't receive any information, it means the student is not registered with the Disability Resource Center. And so your best resource at that point would be to point them back to the DRC so that they can get the process, and then you'll receive a detailed list of what those accommodations are.
I mean, I've had students that go through that route, right? And all I get, they go to DRC and they get accommodation, and all I do is I get an email.
Yeah, and it
Right.
says the student has provided official documentation to
correct.
verify the following conditions, and then there'll be a list of
There's a list of accommodations.
And then
Well,
the accommodations are as
I get
follows.
told extra time, but nothing that would give me any sense as to how to present them, so hey, that's a tip for me to all these awesome tips to put them in practice, right? I mean, now, maybe by looking at this or by experience, I will have some visual tips already, right? But I think that that's unfortunate weakness in how this whole thing is approached for
Well,
autism.
Yes, and Syracuse University has this amazing inclusive view University where, I mean, they started small, but now it's really a rising kind of program. And I was speaking with the director last week, and he spoke about how he encourages all his students to start writing what they need down, and that self-advocacy piece. Because instead of, you finally figuring out how to work with one, or you finally, and then they move on to another one, and because it's hard to disclose, you can't say, oh, so-and-so could use this. It's great when it comes from them. So, if you're working with a student, and what do you need? What works for you? I mean, I would love to help Nicole kind of build this up for our students so that they could really write, like, this is exactly what I need, this is how I need things, broken down, I struggle with this. So until then, it'll have to kind of be a running list, but I would love to encourage, if you see a student and you've got to know them over the, over the semester, ask them to kind of, let's start writing some of these tips down.
One of the ways you can get that need also met is Nicole provides academic coaching, which does center specifically on what the students' needs are. It's one-on-one, and it does specifically work with the executive functions in those places where the students say, this is where I need help. So when you feel like you're out-resourced or outmatched, one of the things you can do for the student is say, hi, have you tried academic coaching? It's an excellent place to get your needs met. You get one-on-one help and begin to work with the student in that way so that you don't have to bear all of the responsibility of having to know everything about the student. The student will come back to you, oftentimes with a list of things that they've been working on, because with academic coaching, they set goals. There's specificity there on specific things the student needs to work on with a goal. So did you do this? And so it's a running conversation so that you don't have to try to manage all of that.
Thank you.
And putting a plug in for Grace and Jen Critch later on are going to do a seminar like this on universal design, which has techniques that will touch on many aspects of that students struggle with, and they're just good teaching practices for us to have under our belt.
A few years ago, CTL created a video, and we videotaped Beryl Pagan, Susan Rogers, and another student who graduated from here who is autistic, who is now a lawyer.
Eric Weber.
What's his name?
Eric
Weber. Just about having a disability. And one of the themes that came out is exactly what you said, asking them, what do you need? And I can't remember which one of them said this, but it was like they've been living with this their whole life. Just asking them, what do you need from me, or what, I don't know exactly the right way to frame it, but.
It's hard because some of them might not be able to actually say what they need, because K-12, everything was in the IEP, all their information was in there. We all knew what we were accountable for to provide services to them. And all of a sudden now they come here and, previously they were learning from their environment. Now they're in their environment and I have to navigate it all on my own. I'm not being told what to do anymore. But that slow conversation and just say, hey, I'm here to help. Do sensory things bother you? I mean, just finding that information and, hey, how I would always approach any kid. I was just like, hey, I'm here just to make school better. How can I make this better for you? What possibly things would you need? What kind of supports? Do you need a buddy? Do you need a friend? Do you need to sit a certain place in the classroom? One of the other things that I just want to, the Inclusive U they were talking about is they had the professor have all the classes and just had a student sign up for every class to take notes that day. So it was only one time for the student in the whole semester, or how many times the class would be repeated. And if you had 3 sections of it, you could have 3 sections of notes. And what that professor did is then that whoever that student was, they uploaded it onto Canvas. And so if any student was missing or anyone needed extra help, they had 3 different sections of notes that day to have up on the board. Little things like that, little accommodations like that, that won't really take any more of your time, but just provide more information for students, is like one of those little things that could be a big thing for some of our kiddos that need more help. So do you need to see someone else's notes? Because you're not taking them very well. Do you want to record it? What are other things that might support you? How did you do this in the past? Besides my mom helping me. How else did you do it in the past? What did your teacher do with you to get you to write this paper?
So rather than expect a student to come to professor's beginning, is it fair for professors to say, hey, I got a notice about some accommodations, help me know how I can help, and so like that. Is that fair to do? And then it's up to them, or we just have to be quiet and wait for them to say anything?
I think it's a fair conversation to have with the whole class and just say, hey, you know, make it kind of open and
General.
broad. And then just say if you have any specific things, you know, just because I think you have to wait kind of for them to really talk to you about it.
Okay.
Legality-wise, I just wouldn't want to step on any toes or just say, hey, I heard you have autism, you know. You know, maybe just kind of see, but I think if you just say, hey, listen, I'm here, you know, I want to help everyone, you know, tell me 3 things you need to help you, you know, get better. And then you could kind of follow up in that conversation. Then you could really hone in on some of those kids that are struggling and say, well, okay, what does this mean? Okay, I got this accommodation list. What does this mean? What else can we do for you?
And if
I
I
think
can
that's
just
fair.
weigh in on that as well, the student has to approach you. They have to come to you, because sometimes students sign up for accommodations and they decide they don't want them. So if you approach the student and say, here, I'm here to do this, then we've kind of crossed the line and put a student in a position where they weren't authorized, you weren't authorized really to have that conversation with them. So when Nicole does the intake meeting, part of that meeting is to say to the student, for every professor that you want accommodations, it's your responsibility to have a conversation. And then at that point, then we get the ball rolling and say, hey, I got the email, these are the things, how can I help, what are some other things I can do? But the student really needs to have that conversation with you, because sometimes, as I said, they don't want to have accommodations in your class, even though you receive the email.
And a lot of that does stem from the fact that they were given services regardless if they wanted them or not. I mean, that was locked in from K-12. And so a lot of them go, ha, I didn't need that. And so it's almost like they have to fail to realize that they need it sometimes. So you might see the pushback of not taking accommodations just because, you know, they were kind of forced for a long time, or they didn't feel like they needed them. A lot of our guys have very like superiority. I know everything, you know, I'm right. That's why group work is hard. I'm right. I know how to do this. And a lot of times they are, but they don't learn how to, you know, go back and forth and work together on things. So kind of having them almost kind of point out, ooh, looks like you're dropping here. What happened to this grade? Or where did this assignment go? You know, they kind of have to go down that road before they know that they need the accommodations again. Yeah.
I guess I just want to follow up on that. In getting the email from the DRC, I thought that I was able to then go to the students, because I actually have sent my students emails. I have 10 students with accommodations this semester, and so I just sent a note to each one saying, you know, I'm here, let me know if there's anything in particular, because I thought that since it was disclosed to me that then I had permission, or is that, I mean, am I crossing some legal line that I shouldn't, that they have to approach me first?
No, they don't have to approach you first, but it should be a conversation, a collaboration.
Right.
It shouldn't be saying, here's your accommodations, let's go. The student should approach you, even if you've reached out to them and say, hey, I got this email, I understand you have accommodations, and they should approach you and say, I don't need them, or ready to go, let's talk more about it.
Yeah, we are having discussions. I just want to make sure that I do something wrong, because I just decided to be proactive, because it's been an issue with the previous student who was blind, and I needed to know exactly, you know, this is what accommodations needs, but it says you can have, but you tell me, is that going to be helpful to you? What else do you need? And we made adjustments to her list of what she needed.
Oh, great, thank you. I know we're kind of running on time here. Should we email, like, invite me to come if you're struggling with a kiddo or a class or something? I mean, I'm really curious about this guy. I love this. I love these kids. I know they're kind of, you know, can be frustrating, but this is my favorite population, truly.
These accommodations work better for some disciplines than others. Definitely. So I think in writing was tend to accommodate them a little bit better than in literature. So in literature, they have to be able to understand metaphors, simile, in language. There have to be a function and questions. I'm not going to, I think that change that, you don't have a very good class for the rest of the students.
And I'm not saying you can never give them idioms, but they are going to need an idiom book. They're going to need the book, or like the language to say this is what it is and this is what it means. Like they're going to need. I have an adult friend with autism
That's not
who.
what literature is about. It's not all parables or allegories, because the metaphor is expressive of many things at one time, and they have to learn to understand that to some extent.
But they're going to have to actually have a resource to go on to figure that out.
You know what, we're going to have to
Yeah.
draw this to a close because there's another class coming in here. Grace, thank you so much.